A while ago I started looking into what it would actually take to feed a colony on Mars, and there was this problem I kept running into. It shows up in The Martian with Watney's potato farm, but it also exposes a limitation about how we approach agricultural engineering here on Earth. A single gram of Earth soil can contain over 1 billion bacterial cells, an entire invisible ecosystem cycling nutrients, breaking down organic matter, and quietly keeping everything alive. But Martian dirt isn't soil. When Watney mixes his waste with Martian dirt, he's effectively trying to jumpstart a billion-organism microcity from scratch. The more I looked into this topic, the more unstable the picture became, because researchers actually tried growing plants in Martian soil simulant, and at first some of the results looked surprisingly promising. Plants did sprout. In one experiment, Martian soil simulant even outperformed Earth soil. But a pattern begins to emerge across all these studies. The closer they get to actual Martian conditions, the harder it becomes to keep anything alive. And when you add one specific ingredient to the mix, plant growth collapses almost entirely. Most of what we call soil is a living system so biologically complex that we still don't fully understand it. Thousands of microbial species exist in this interconnected network, where each species depends on dozens of others. And most of them we don't even fully understand what they actually do. But Martian regolith isn't missing the raw ingredients, it's missing the biological machinery that unlocks them. So before you can even plant anything, you have to replicate the result of hundreds of millions of years of microbial evolution. And then there's the ingredient that you're fighting against. In 2008, NASA's Phoenix lander confirmed something that broke every Mars farming concept on the table. Martian regolith is laced with perchlorates, the same compounds used in rocket propellant, but in high enough concentrations, they disrupt plant growth and inhibit biological activity. And yet, buried inside some ordinary Earth soils, there's a small class of bacteria that don't just survive perchlorates, they're able to metabolize them as part of their energy cycle. Researchers wanted to know, could that same biology work on Mars? So they took bacteria from farmland soil and introduced them to Martian soil simulants spiked with perchlorate. Each generation, they kept the communities that showed the highest level of perchlorate reduction and transferred them into fresh, toxic soil, almost like forcing adaptation by selecting the best performing mixes. And at first, it worked. Perchlorate breakdown improved each round, climbing past 50% by generation 3. But then it broke. By the 4th generation, perchlorate reduction dropped to nearly zero. Whatever the cause, the biology stopped responding. So if the biology keeps failing, maybe you can just sidestep it entirely. Perchlorates dissolve in water, why not just wash them out? Researchers tested exactly that, and it worked. They were able to fully remove almost all perchlorates from the soil in under a day. But now you're running an industrial-scale soil refinery on Mars just to make your farmland usable. Every batch of regolith has to be excavated and processed. That's in a colony where you already have limited power supply, most of which is needed for life support. And that's before you factor in all the toxic runoff which needs to go somewhere. Suddenly the brute force alternative starts to look tempting. Why don't we just skip the engineering altogether and ship functional soil from Earth? To get a sense of the scale, I simplified the problem down to one of the most calorie-dense crops you can grow, potatoes. And the numbers get absurd quite fast. The average person needs around 2,500 calories a day, around 900,000 a year. Potatoes yield roughly 770 calories per kilogram, and typical arable land produces around 3 kilograms per square meter annually. So feeding one person requires roughly 400 square meters of growing area. At 25 centimeters deep, that's around 150 tons of soil per person. SpaceX charges around $2,700 per person just to reach low Earth orbit. Transporting 150 tons of soil would cost over $400 million per person, and Mars would be considerably more. So if you can't ship it in, you have to build a microbial ecosystem that can handle the chemistry and adapt to the stress. I came across one idea that scientists have been testing. Instead of recreating the full soil ecology, engineer a minimal microbiome with only the most critical species. a simplified ecological core designed specifically for Martian agriculture. In the lab, this works, but as soon as you push it towards real conditions like fluctuating temperatures and unstable moisture, the system starts to tilt. Stress-tolerant, weedy species start to take over, and a few generations later, the community you built has quietly become something else. But even if you manage to control the stress, there's a second problem that's harder to engineer around. Earth soils are constantly reseeded and buffered by surrounding ecosystems. But a Mars greenhouse is a sealed island. In a full, diverse soil ecosystem, that wouldn't matter. Dozens of species overlap in function, so losing one rarely causes a collapse. But strip that diversity down to a minimal core, and every species becomes a single point of failure. Imagine the colony is set up, and you're part of a crew arriving a few decades later. You inherited a soil ecosystem that's been largely stable for decades. Then a sudden mechanical fault causes a pH spike in your growing environment. A critical species is wiped out, and there's nothing there to replace it. Within weeks, the soil begins to fail, the crops turn yellow, and you're trapped on a planet that's completely out of options. In The Martian, the potato farm is a problem you solve once, but the real challenge isn't getting plants to grow. It's building a living system capable of remaining stable and sustaining itself over centuries. And this isn't just a Mars problem. It takes nature hundreds of years to generate a single inch of topsoil. Soil formation is so slow that topsoil is effectively a non-renewable resource on a human timescale. But modern agriculture treats it like an infinite resource. One study found that organic farming systems can hold up to 84% more microbial biomass and activity than conventional industrial agriculture. So whether it's on Mars or somewhere on Earth, the question is essentially the same. Can we build a stable living microbiome from scratch, or do we only know how to borrow one?